Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, A Strategic Guide to Identifying, Delighting, and Retaining Your Most Optimal Customer, presented by StayNTouch, ReviewPro, and Kalibri Labs. I'm your host, Frigola, and I'm joined by my panel. First up is Fiona Gillen. Fiona is a VP of Marketing at ReviewPro, the leading provider of guest intelligence solutions for the hotel industry. With 20 years of experience working on marketing internationally, Fiona is an expert in digital marketing, customer behavior, and online reputation management. Prior to ReviewPro, Fiona was a VP of Marketing at Splendia, a luxury online travel agency. Joining us from Kalibri Labs is the VP of Revenue Strategy and Account Management, Mark Mazzico. He leads the revenue strategy team at Kalibri Labs, working to identify and implement new client solutions. He joined Kalibri Labs from Burson Marsteller, a leading crisis management firm in the DC area, where he led the client team responsible for developing and delivery of their online audience analytics products. And rounding out our panel is Hayat Adhanom, a sales director here at StayNTouch. He oversees growing partnerships in the U.S. Southwest and Western Europe. Hayat has been in the cloud and SaaS space for over 8 years, working with industries from healthcare to education and now hospitality, helping expand StayNTouch's global reach. He enjoys working with companies ahead of the technology curve that are always displaying foresight in their respective industries and disrupting the paradigm via innovation. With that said, I'd like to welcome our audience. Once again, we have a lot on the schedule. Today's webinar is going to touch on 4 key points: understanding and targeting your most optimal business mix, capitalizing on new technologies to increase guest engagement, leveraging guest intelligence to exceed expectations, and streamlining operations to drive service excellence. And before we launch into the actual presentation and the discussion, I want to make sure that our audience gets involved early. So I'm going to ask you guys to participate in 2 audience poll questions. The first one is, you launched a poll. When looking for tech solutions for your property, what is the most important thing you consider? I'll give you guys about 30 seconds, and then I'm going to launch the results. All right, about 10 seconds. All right, closing the poll now. Sharing the results. When looking for tech solutions for your property, what is the most important thing you consider? Service level of tech provider, 17% said that. Ease and use of usability, 27%. And then features and functionality, 40%. API connection integrations 10%, and price 7%. So all of these issues that we'll be talking about or addressing today can be directly addressed with technology, and that's really the point that we want to get across here. And so to know where the pain points are for our audience is important. And with that said, I'm going to launch a second poll question. What are the biggest pain points for choosing any technology, any technology platform? 30 seconds. Give you guys about 10 more seconds here. And I am closing the poll and sharing the results. What are the biggest pain points for choosing any technology platform? This was, you guys got to select any that applied, so it seems like integrations is the biggest concern here, which makes sense. Now we're asking that you don't just buy into one legacy system, but really a collection of best of breeds, and that means that all of your systems have to be well connected. That said, we are going to move along with today's discussion, and the first discussion point, understanding and targeting your most optimal business mix. Mark is going to lead this discussion. Mark, take it away.
Great, thanks, Ree. If you could just go to the next slide. What I can tell you is one of the things that we've been doing heavily here at Kalibri is taking a look at how channel impacts your overall profitability. And what I can say is it's, I think, becoming more and more clear to everyone in the industry that understanding not just the type of business you're booking in terms of rack or corporate or group, but where that business is coming from heavily impacts the overall profitability of your customer base. So one of the things that we've seen is if you look market by market, different markets show different rates of return on different channels. So your individual hotel is going to have a different mix of profitability from a hotel in a different market. It may even have a different rate of profitability for a channel than a hotel in the same market, depending on the negotiations you have. As you can see here, profit contribution between channels can swing from 10 to 15%, depending on the channel. So a customer booking the exact same rate on a different channel could result in a 10 to 15% change in actual profitability for your property, depending on the channel they book through. So what that clearly means is, among other things, it is a very good idea for you to incentivize your customers to book through channels that will be less expensive for you whenever you're trying to maximize the profitable customers you're trying to bring into your property. Free, if you go to the next slide. One of the things we have noticed is that when you take a look at the behavior of loyalty customers online, so customers that have participated in your or some type of loyalty program, loyalty customers in general seem to prefer the channels that have lower booking expenses and as a result higher flow-through profitability for properties that are booking. So obviously in the context of our earlier slide, if you're looking at trying to encourage customers to book rates that cause you to face less flow-through costs as a hotelier, what you'll want to do is try to get more of your customers to behave like these loyalty customers. So obviously the question is, well, what exactly can loyalty customers do that my regular customers can't do? I mean, obviously some of the things that we've noticed are changes in lead times and length of stay that loyalty customers bring with them that can help to improve profitability and help you build a base of less costly business to build your bookings upon. And also, as customers become repeat loyalty customers, they require a lower amount of initial marketing spend in order to acquire their business. As a result, we have higher engagement at a lower cost from those customers. And then finally, of course, loyalty customers are more likely to primarily look at you during down cycles, and having more control over the guest engagement experience allows you to have control over those guests during down cycles in the economy, when otherwise you might have to resort to a broader and more expensive methodology of going after high cost and low value customers. If you could go to the next slide. One of the other things we've noticed about loyalty customers over the course of the last 3 to 4 years is that loyalty customer percentage contribution has increased in basically every chain scale over the entire industry over that time period. Basically, all hotels have seen noticeable uptick in loyalty customer contribution in the U.S. As you can see on the slide right here, in particular, both the economy and the upper upscale chain scales have experienced really strong growth over the course of the last 2 years. Part of that is obviously due to some of the book direct campaigns that the larger brands are putting out there, but really everyone is experiencing this uptick. It's not limited to just the brands that are running those campaigns. So what that means is these luxury customers who we've established are usually higher profit customers and are customers that typically actualize higher ADRs than some of the higher cost channels, are also becoming a larger portion of your overall mix of business. There are a lot of these customers that are coming in that are new loyalty customers that haven't belonged to loyalty programs before. So the question obviously comes up, okay, if we're trying to encourage customers to book loyalty, we have now encouraged more loyalty customers than ever before. They're becoming a larger portion and a more important portion of our mix than they ever have. and we're seeing that we have the ability to cause them to book less expensive channels. What exactly is it we need to do in order to retain these customers? And really the primary question is, how is it that we retain these customers without just giving them a reason from a price incentive standpoint? Is the only answer that we're going to give them discounts for the rest of their days, and that's how they stay loyalty customers with us? Because obviously, although we've reduced cost at that point for the acquisition of the booking, we're then also reducing the top line revenue of the booking, which sort of negates the cost standpoint. So Free, if you could go to the next slide. So what we've determined is that although the increase in customer and loyalty customer bookings is valuable and has unquestionably created revenue for a large number of hotels, and we have a study that we're releasing shortly that will show a lot of the actual impacts of the current book direct programs out there. In the long term, the real answer is we need to create engagement with loyalty customers on a personal service level. It's not going to be sustainable or even advisable to continue some sort of rate war around loyalty customers, because at the end of the day, what you're going to do is convert your entire customer base to loyalty and have your entire customer base simply shift downward in price. What you need to do is figure out ways of maintaining and encouraging a customer base that is primarily loyalty by individualization of service, whether that is mobile chat or mobile apps that allow them to remotely check in, specialized room selection, mobile and Bluetooth enabled web keys, things like that that could potentially be used as carrots for loyalty customers. These things could potentially help us significantly in encouraging this loyalty customer relationship and eventually allow you to create a group of customers that, although from the customer perspective they are not paying any more than they would have if they booked through a higher cost channel, they are in fact paying you more because there is less cost associated with the actual initial attraction of that customer. We have definitely seen that the new loyalty customers that have been coming over the last 2 years are not quite as aggressive as the sort of classic loyalty customer in terms of repetition of stay, but they are still significantly more loyal than non-loyal customers, which is to say they're repeating their business a lot more, they're engaging with individual hotels, they are still booking higher value rate segments through higher value channels than any non-loyalty customers typically do. Now, obviously, that changes by hotel and by market. It's not a universal law. None of the things that I've mentioned have been. However, they are sort of the broad industry trends out there. So one of the things that we've seen a lot of platforms doing is figuring out ways with which they can engage with these loyalty customers and slowly basically own the customer relationship on the front end to encourage them into these high-value channels. That's something that we think needs to be a focus on the go forward. And as I said, we're doing a lot of research around that right now, which is showing some real potential opportunity amongst these customers. And Free, that's the end of my section, I think, if there are any questions.
All right, thanks so much, Mark. And I want to follow up with a question. So what difference do you see in booking lead time and length of stay between loyalty and non-loyalty guests?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, as with the booking channel costs, that really varies market by market and category by category. In general, if I just took a look at the nationwide averages, I can absolutely say that loyalty customers in general compared to non-loyalty customers book at a slightly longer lead time, usually about a 2 to 3 day longer lead time, and we're talking about 2/10 of a day longer length of stay. When you break it down by market, it changes really dramatically by market. So some markets, especially markets that tend to have a very heavy third-party presence, like, for example, New York City, actually have longer lead times on non-loyalty customers because there is so much non-loyalty business flowing in through these channels that are also now becoming the base of business, the first place customers go to, which is then backfilled by direct channel loyalty customers. However, the majority of markets in the U.S. that are not New York and are not heavy third-party consumers follow that initial trend line that I was talking about of longer length of stay, longer booking lead time for loyalty customers, giving you the opportunity to have them be your initial base.
Right, and I imagine what also plays into that is that once they are a loyalty customer, they're more comfortable with your brand, and so there's less to consider, less to question, and so when you get customers to feel comfortable with your brand, it's going to inevitably increase their or extend their stay time and decrease their lead time. So thank you for that, Mark, and we are going to move forward to our next discussion point, led by Hyatt, capitalizing on new technologies to increase guest engagement and personalization. Hyatt?
Thanks, Bree. I appreciate that. So, I think that right now we're seeing a big surge when it comes to mobility. It's really the elephant in the room. And when we're thinking about service concepts and the, adopting to these new modern guests from any generation, from Generation Z all the way down to baby boomers, it's about leveraging the technology that is available to us. And if you go to the next slide here, Free, we can see that mobility and this technology is really shifting the guest experience and the expectation of the guest and the staff from a user experience standpoint. So I think it's interesting that this year is actually the 10-year anniversary of the iPhone. If we think about how that has changed the way we interact with each other as people, and then the way we interact with services and products that we purchase, there's really a huge opportunity here when it comes to adapting to that mobile and modern guest, right? I think it goes without saying, like we said, the elephant in the room is really mobility. You can see here that at a Hotel Revenue Strategy Summit in August, even 2 years ago, this is something that everyone sees on the horizon. It's really here. We're actually really behind in the hospitality industry when it comes to, a full mobile guest experience or guest journey. And the other thing to think about is that, from a staff user experience, you want a system that is fluid. You want a system that allows automation, that allows it to, allows the staff to be a lot more responsive to guests. And mobility provides that choice of service, whether it's, walking up to a guest with a tablet to check them in, having the guests do a preemptive mobile check-in so you know when they're arriving so you can prepare for them, or allowing a guest to do self-service, right? At this point, consumer behavior is really shifting to personalization. It's shifting to having that option of service, right? Whether it's mobile or physical. And I think Airbnb is a great story for the hospitality industry. I think there's a lot of opportunity to leverage what they did to make their brand so successful and drive loyalty with their customers. I actually stayed at Airbnb about a month ago up in Cape Cod, and I was able to interact with my host at any time, and it gave me that real-time connection with my host. And there's a lot of things that hotels can do very similar to that kind of framework, where you're driving additional service to the guests and giving them real-time connection to your property and to your guest services. Next slide. So we are again in that personalization age. So if you think about where we've come as consumers, where your guests are going when it comes to behavior, it's all about immediacy now. And there's a report called The Age of I, released by IHG, that talks about this new on-demand guest, right? And the ability to dictate their service via virtual or digital interaction. And I don't think that that's something that anybody can deny at this point. I think that there's a lot of different ways that you can look at addressing that personalization, whether it's mobile check-in, allowing your systems to be a lot more proactive when it comes to the guest experience, and then allowing the guests to really own their experience through that mobile engagement. So if they want to upgrade, if they want a pack and play, or if they want something in their room prior to even arriving on the property, providing them that medium to do that. And if we think about the user experience, when we tie staff to guests, right? The front desk is something that it's not going to go away, but you should allow for additional flexibility where, if you have a GSA that has a tablet, they can walk up to a guest, they can walk them to their room, check them in curbside, really allow for a more fluid front desk experience that will extend service and show the guest a true commitment to their experience. And let the guest give you information. I think that this ties back to what Mark was mentioning on loyalty and really getting to know the guest so that you can personalize your communication with them. Every touch point you have with the guest, whether it's mobile or whether it's on property, allows you to learn more about them and then customize or really personalize their experience going forward with your property. And I think what's really interesting is the surge in self-service. I mean, this has been around from a retail standpoint for a long time now. We're seeing it become more prevalent. When you fly now, you have the ability to get your boarding pass at a at a kiosk, and then even when you rent your car, you can actually go up to a kiosk. You don't have to interact with anybody. So this is something that is now ingrained with consumer expectations. And there was a recent study by a lodging publication that indicated 66% of guests would prefer a self-service option, and especially I would think business travelers, people that are in groups. So providing that option shows us a true commitment to the guest experience. And all of these things tie to having a system that is built for mobility, that's built on a modern framework, which would be a modern or mobile PMS. Next slide. And so when we think about this virtual guest, right, and trying to adhere to the modern guest, digital check-in is something that you can really conform around your current culture, whether it's high touch. If you still want to interact with the guest, you can still have that physical interaction, but you should give them that flexibility to be checked in while they're sitting at the bar, while they're arriving curbside. If they're in a large group, they're in a meeting, and you want to approach the group with a tablet to check them in, it gives them an added layer of service from the front desk. If we think about the staff side, because I think that's pretty important to think about the impact mobility has on the staff experience. I think that all of the mobility components, whether it's mobile check-in, self-service check-in, offering upgrades, amenities, things like that, it creates automation. And that data within a mobile PMS is very linear, where you can actually see from the guest to front desk to housekeeping, all of the requests, and it allows you to be a lot more effective and a lot more proactive when it comes to the on-property guest experience, because you're going to have that information available to your users, to your staff, even before the guest gets there. And for personalizing, again, owning the experience from the guest standpoint, early check-in, upgrades, these are things that we've been conditioned to do. If we think about travelers in the airline industry, we get an email the day before offering extra pillows, offering upgrades to business class, things like that. So we're already used to this. So why not continue that experience and provide that guest that option? And so the last point here, when we're looking at the delivery of the key or the key fulfillment process, creating a custom option for that for the guest, where they can continue to pick it up from the front desk, go to a kiosk, self-service kiosk, get it themselves, or actually transition to a mobile key, which would be a, for lack of a better term, a turnkey option for the guest, no pun intended, where the guest can actually do the mobile check-in and actually get their key and go right up to their room. So providing that flexibility, providing that option, something that the modern and mobile guest sees true value in. Next slide. So, I keep mentioning the staff experience. I think that you want to provide technology that staff are, maybe not excited to use. No one's really excited to use systems, but something that they feel enables them, right? It makes them faster, makes them more nimble, allowing for a more holistic approach to the staff to guest communication, where they can obviously communicate in person, and then you have components and capabilities where you can text with the guest, where you can email with the guest, you can interact with them on your website, live chat. So coming up with a true mobile equation for the guest to allow for maximum engagement. And then with that mobile engagement, again, you're going to get to know more about the guests. You're going to know what they want even before they get there. You can, like we mentioned with Airbnb, one of the things that they do great is that local knowledge of where you're staying, right? They tell you events, activities that are going on. They give you that personalization and local knowledge even before you get there. So that's something that you can do when it comes to mobile guest engagement and the mobile guest journey even before they arrive.
All right, thanks so much, Hyatt. And before we move on, I do want to press you on something. So you say that having a mobile experience is essential to a hotel really being able to connect with their guests, but how do you quantify that, or how do you do that without buying into an app, or is that necessary?
Well, I think it's up to the hotel. I think that apps are so 2010. I know it's 2017. It didn't seem that far away, but I think an app is an option. You know, some of the bigger brands, they've invested in those apps and they have the money to do that. I think that when we're looking at different layers of hotel groups, you know, looking at a system that is browser-based or web agnostic is the industry term, that's lighter, that doesn't require a guest to create a username and download an app. Because if you think about it realistically, if you're traveling for 2 days for business, are you going to download an app, create a username, those types of things? So having that as an option, but having a more light and lean browser-based system that is actually coming automatically or via email, so the guests can just click on that, it'll open and optimize no matter what device they're on, whether they're on a tablet, a smartphone, or a laptop. That's going to be your best bet for conversion. I think the stat right now in the industry is about a 5 to 10% conversion for mobile apps, whereas like a web-based check-in option, the statistic for conversion is around 35 to 45%. So that's a pretty glaring conversion variance right there, and I think that makes, that kind of tells you what's the best approach.
All right, thanks so much, Hyatt, and we are going to move on to our next discussion point, led by Fiona, leveraging guest intelligence to exceed expectations. Fiona?
Thanks, Bree, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks to everyone who's listening today. So at ReviewPro, if you just go on to the next slide, please. We believe that the battle is won or lost depending on whether you exceed guest expectations. So the world's really changed, and this ties back to what Hyatt's just been saying. When I studied marketing, which is far too many years ago to remember, everything was around the concept of the 4 Ps, product, price, promotion, place. But this has evolved, and in particular, I think in the hotel industry. And often today, marketers are talking instead about the 4 Es, where the product has evolved into the experience. And each individual traveler, so depending on whether they're going on a romantic weekend away or on a business trip, is looking for a different experience. And hoteliers need to find a way to better manage this experience and exceed their expectations. So in this slide here, you can see an example of one brand who excelled by delighting and inspiring their guests. This is the Library Hotel Collection. And their team has worked with ReviewPro for numerous years, and their 4 boutique hotels in New York are consistently ranked in the city's top 10 hotels on TripAdvisor. So at the start of this year, one of their hotels in Europe, which is the Aria Hotel Budapest, was named the #1 hotel in the world on TripAdvisor. And I was speaking to Adele Goodman of the brand a few weeks ago, and she told me just how enormous the impact of this prestigious award had been. And so in the graph here, you can see how the hotel's TripAdvisor monthly traffic jumped from less than 20,000 views to over 120,000 views from January onwards, whenever the announcement was made. So it's really quite incredible. And as Adele says, the cornerstone of their marketing is rave reviews from guests. So if we move on to the next slide, I want to look at how you can leverage guest intelligence to improve the guest experience and encourage those all-important rave reviews. So what exactly is guest intelligence? So it's a complete view of everything that's being said by guests across all channels. So it combines the feedback you get from online reviews with the direct feedback you get from guest satisfaction surveys, and that can be both in-stay or post-stay. But it's also what we call live requests, meaning impromptu feedback direct from guests, or need-based requests. And more guests today are using all sorts of messaging apps to communicate with hotels. And some guests still prefer to call reception or customer service. and we can also capture guest feedback from there too, and all in multiple languages, of course. So guest intelligence is a combination of all this feedback, but the guest feedback data is only the start. And what hoteliers need is the powerful analytics to get the real, valuable, actionable insight that the staff can use to make the improvements where it's going to matter most. And in order to boost the results at your hotel, data is not enough. There has to be a cultural change throughout the entire organization, across all departments, as is illustrated in the diagram here. So this means putting the guest at the center of everything you're doing and making sure that the right person is getting the right information at the right time. So this means new processes, getting the whole team involved, and setting clear goals and taking action. If we move on to the next slide, we'll actually look at how you can use the insights that you are provided by guest intelligence to build these experiences that people will love. We can start by monitoring the key guest satisfaction KPIs and see how it's evolved over time at your hotel or your group of hotels. I've listed some key metrics here on the right in green. Two of the most important ones are the Global Review Index. So this is developed by ReviewPro, and it's industry standard online reputation score. And it's based on data from over 175 different review sites and OTAs in 45 languages. And what this enables a hotel to do is to identify how online reviews can be influencing a potential guest booking process at any given date. Another important KPI is the Net Promoter Score. And this is used in guest surveys, and it's a score that measures the willingness of guests to recommend your hotel to others based on their experience at your property. So if you're monitoring your KPIs carefully, you can identify if guest satisfaction decreases at any point, and then use the analytics to understand what the key drivers of these problems are. So you can drill down into the details using semantic analysis, which is basically analysis of the comments that people are actually writing, either negative or positive. And you can use this to understand why guests are happy or not. And guest surveys is also another great way to get a better understanding. So in the past, sort of more traditional surveys were like an audit. They were asking guests to score hundreds of different concepts. But today they're much more flexible, and you can use techniques such as question logic to show or hide questions based upon a guest's previous response, so that you can really get down to the detail of and understand the why behind the score. Guest intelligence is not only about your own brand's performance, but also that of your competitors as well. So you can see where you're outperforming other brands and where you need to improve. And then the key is obviously acting on these insights, which we'll look at in more detail. On the next slide, we talk about finding and mobilizing advocates, because it's not enough to focus on making sure guests leave your hotel happy. It's also really important to encourage these guests to become advocates of your brand. So finding advocates is relatively easy because your hotel already has a relationship with them. They're primarily your guests, these people who've stayed with you, or they've come in for dinner, or if they've attended a meeting in your hotel and they've had a positive experience. Where can you find them? You can find advocates in your hotel's PMS database, in your CRM database, social media followings. You could also look in your guest satisfaction surveys once they've completed them, and those who've written rave reviews on review sites online. However, just because someone's a fan doesn't actually mean that they're an advocate of your brand. Fans love a product, but they don't necessarily promote it. So what you have to try to do is actually encourage them and your fans to become advocates. So you can be proactive, ask them to write a review, to share or to endorse your content on social media, or ideally post their own content, maybe a photograph and tag your hotel in it. There's also some paid options that can be used for finding and mobilizing advocates. So two popular tools are the Facebook custom audience and Twitter tailored audiences, which can help you find your guests on social media. So that's the end of this section, but we'd now like to move on to discuss how you can streamline operations at your hotel to help drive service excellence. So I'm going to give a few pointers first, and then I'll hand over to Hyatt. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to look at how to help staff focus on the right priorities, because I believe there's no point having the best guest feedback analytics available on the market if those valuable insights aren't being acted on. So So you have to be able to help your staff to focus on the right priorities. So one of the first points here is to have clear processes for following up on guest feedback. You need to define workflows for managing and guest requests and for service recovery. You can also look at creating work groups with the relevant staff members. And these can be maybe people from the same department or across multiple departments, depending on what makes most sense for your organization and how you're structured. I think people often get afraid when they hear the word big data, and that's why it's critical to avoid information overload. And this is where guest intelligence tools can really help. If you don't want your staff to feel overwhelmed, there's options to customize the filters or the views depending on the role of the person. So for example, the F&B manager could create a view to only see the reviews related to the restaurant and see no other comments. It's also really powerful to be able to set up real-time alerts, so on your by email or on your mobile, so that you know about the most important issues instantly. There's also tools available to create tickets or cases, so you can create these for your colleagues, and so that you're sure the feedback is being acted on. And these can also, there's even tools where you can automatically create tickets based on criteria that are set. And also to help people prioritize their tasks. They come in the morning, they have so many things to do, they don't know where to start. But tools now offer to-do lists available, and they can see exactly what's due, what they need to do in 1 hour, what they need to do in 5 hours, for example. And then the last point in this slide is about empowering your teams. You know, how you train and support, how you engage your staff. I mean, it's important to give them the freedom to treat guests in a special way. I mean, I know I talked about processes before, but if they have to ask their manager before being able to do anything nice for a guest, it can be too late. The moment's passed. So let them show initiative, and as Adele would say from the Library Hotel collection, sparkle some sunshine on guests. And the last slide I want to go through today is about improving service recovery. So as we've said, customer behavior is evolving, and there's more and more guests. They're connected by smartphone or tablet whenever they're staying at the hotel. And obviously this offers a great opportunity for engaging with guests, as we've already discussed. So checking in with guests during their stay using technology such as in-stay surveys or other touch points is a perfect way to detect any unhappy guests before they check out and have the chance to write a negative online review, which could be damaging to your brand. And if you think about it, Expedia's already sending in-stay surveys. So many guests have OTA apps on their phones, and this means that the OTAs have a direct channel to your guests while they're on your property. And so you need to be thinking about engaging with guests on property too. One way of doing this I've seen to be really effective is to have a pop-up whenever guests connect to the hotel Wi-Fi for the first time, with a simple question asking how their stay has been so far. But just be careful, because if you ask the guests if they've had a problem, you have to have the processes and the guidelines in place to be able to solve the problem, because otherwise you could end up making a bad situation even worse. So it's about the process we talked about previously. But if done well, you can transform a potentially damaging situation into an opportunity to deliver unbelievable service, exceed expectations, and to drive customer loyalty and advocacy. So I'll now hand you over to Hyatt to continue with this section. Thank you.
Fiona, so actually before we hand it over to Hyatt, I just wanted to follow up on one thing. So you talked about in-stay surveys. Is it only relevant for resorts who have guests staying for longer stays, or can they also be used in city hotels as well?
I think we've seen a huge increase in the use of in-stay surveys, I'd say, over the last sort of year or 2 years, especially in the resort area, because I think they're specifically relevant for resorts where they tend to have a longer stay, if the guests may be staying 4 nights, 1 week. And what people tend to do is to send an email perhaps on day 2 or day 3 with 3 or 4 short questions just to work out if everything's okay. But we've also seen more and more of the city hotels or hotels with shorter stays, maybe business stays, or even 1 night, who are starting to use in-stay surveys and seeing that they're getting really relevant results from this. Perhaps in these cases, maybe the example I gave earlier of the pop-up whenever the guest connects to the Wi-Fi for the first time, it can be more appropriate for them. That could be another way. So they're being creative in the ways that they're asking this question. But what we're definitely seeing is that hotels are trying to more and more find engagement with the guests while they're on property so that they have time to solve the issue before they leave. Because at the end of the day, once they've left and the review is posted, it's almost too late to get back and to solve that problem.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much, Fiona, for your insight. And we are going to pass it off to Hyatt to finish off this discussion point and the webinar. We'll turn it over to the audience for a couple of questions after that. Hyatt?
Thanks, Free. Thanks, Fiona. That was really great points and some interesting segue points into, kind of leveraging technology to make your staff more nimble, more engaged. And I think that if we think about the modern consumer, your staff are consumers as well. They want to use technology to make them, more proactive, allow them to be more flexible in how they do their jobs. I think a great example is the sales and revenue managers. If you can imagine, director of sales and marketing being able to walk up to a group as they arrive on property, check them in with a tablet, see availability if they have extra group members, or even when they're at a meeting, when they're pitching a group on a package or something like that, being able to log in on their device and say, okay, this is the availability we have for these types of rooms at this time. So just extending the reach of your technology, right, and giving your staff more ownership over how they use it, and then being more dynamic, right? Being able to see the rate trends. Fiona mentioned big data. That data is valuable to you to be more, proactive, be more nimble when it comes to your rate management, revenue management approach. You can instantly go in and update certain rates based on what you're seeing in the market. So that real-time access, shows to be valuable for the staff. And then from a GM or from an administrative standpoint, they can view when you're looking at mobile and truly cloud-based PMS, they can view availability. They can view how many VIPs they have coming in, any kind of action items they have when it comes to maintenance, things like that. And it allows them to be more connected to their property and to the data that's important, the KPIs at their property. So, I think it's interesting because in speaking with a lot of different forward-thinking hotel groups, they see, the technology as a sticking point for employee retention. If you have tools that make employees feel like they have more control over their daily tasks and their daily requirement or their daily responsibilities, they're going to be more likely to stay and feel confident when working with guests.
All right, thanks, Hyatt, for wrapping that one up. I think it is a very important point to hone in on your employers or employees and to understand or to give them the ability to better service your guests by having technologies that are going to enable them to do their jobs and not technologies that are going to be too difficult. So ease of use is very important when it comes to any technology. It's not good enough just to deploy this technology. Your staff is going to be at the front lines, and if they are not able to service your guests to the best of their ability, that technology can quickly become problematic. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to our audience for a couple of questions. And Mark, we're going to start off with you. Haven't heard from you in a while, so feel free to take your time here. Will new loyalty customers potentially attracted by loyalty member rate discounts behave the same as traditional loyalty customers?
Yeah, that's a good question. Obviously, it's a little early in the game to have the real true answer on that. However, what we have seen from new loyalty customers is that when you attract new people who have been attracted primarily by a rate discount, they're obviously not going to be your traditional customer, right? They're not going to be the corporate customer that's staying, 70 times a year, that has a very standard pattern, or the customer that has always stayed with you forever. And so we're definitely seeing lower rates of return, lower lengths of stay, and booking lead times that are more akin to traditional booking lead times for leisure customers. However, That is not to say that they are exactly the same as your non-loyalty customers. They're not quite as powerful as your traditional loyalty customers, but they're still significantly more likely to return, significantly longer length of stay than your pure non-loyalty customer. And that's still giving a pretty decent bump in terms of overall return on investment for these new loyalty customers. Obviously, the longer term is going to play out and show exactly how much they actually do vary from the traditional loyalty customers. And I think a lot of that's going to have to do with how we treat the loyalty customers now that we've got their attention through the rate discount.
And that's when the hard work starts, right? You've got their attention, they believe in your brand, and now you've got to keep that retention. So Fiona, we're going to turn it over to you. You mentioned creating cases automatically. How is this done?
If you have an automatic case management system, something like this, how it works is that you can set rules that create a case automatically, so it creates a ticket for somebody to follow up on without somebody having to manually create a ticket saying, can you please do this? So for example, if you link it to your online reputation management system, you can use these automatic cases to implement your review response strategy. So for example, if you have, you could create a rule that says, all negative reviews coming in from our 6 key sites, such as TripAdvisor and Booking.com, they must be responded to within 48 hours. And so if a review comes in and it's negative from one of these key sites, it automatically creates a ticket and then based on the language, sends it to the relevant person. And then you can also do escalation rules. So you could say, after 48 hours, if this case hasn't been resolved and this review hasn't been responded to online, this case is escalated, and then the review has to be responded from corporate office, for example, or it's escalated to the GM. So it works like this way. I mean, I guess you can set rules based on any of the feedback that you're getting. I mean, it could be an in-stay where instead of being a 48-hour time to respond, it could be in-stay. It's a service question. This creates an issue where a ticket has to be responded to within 30 minutes. So it's really, it can really be quite flexible, but you can create rules based on the feedback and then set different time limits for when that has to be resolved.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And we're going to turn it over to Hyatt. Hyatt, does mobile check-in disrupt the guest and staff interaction?
I don't think so. I think that you decide and you dictate what the guest experience is when it comes to mobile check-in. A lot of the mobile check-in capabilities out there allow for pre-arrival check-in. So like you would do when you fly, right? You get that email, it offers you amenities, offers you an upgrade, but you still interact with the person at the boarding gate. So you can do something similar there where you just have intelligence about the guests and you're giving them options based on whether you have upgrades available, whether you have amenities you want to offer to them. And if they have any requests, you can route those to your front desk even before they arrive. Now there is an option to do a complete holistic mobile check-in where the guest can do a pre-arrival check-in and then you can actually automate the mobile key to get provision for the guest so they can actually have the option to go right up to their room using their mobile device. So I think the takeaway is you have options. It's based on the guest journey you want to provide, based on the user experience you want to provide. And I think the key and I think the takeaway from us is that you want to give the guest choice. If they want to completely automate their check-in process, even using mobile check-in, then give them that option. So I think that's that there's autonomy in how you deploy something like that.
All right, and this one is for you, Fiona. Why focus on negative reviews? Aren't your positive reviews going to generate more money?
Whenever you're do you mean by responding to negative reviews or positive reviews? What we've seen is that a negative review online, if somebody's a potential customer, so not the guest that stayed with you, but somebody who's searching on TripAdvisor or Booking.com to decide where their next hotel stay is going to be. And if they see positive reviews, that's great. But if they see negative reviews, it could obviously put them off choosing your hotel, and they're maybe going to choose one of your competitor hotels and see instead. But if you've taken the time to respond to that person, you can sometimes clarify what's maybe there's some misunderstanding, but you're taking that time and you're showing that person, okay, not every hotel is perfect, maybe there is a problem, but you've taken the time to respond to that person. So you're showing the potential bookers that, hey, this hotel actually cares about their guests and they've taken the time to respond to them. So in our sort of recommendation for responding to review strategy, we would always say to concentrate first, your priority is to respond to your negative reviews, because that's the ones that can really impact negatively how your brand is viewed by potential bookers. You should then also respond to your really positive clients, because you want to encourage them to be your brand advocates and you want to really thank them. And then your least priority reviews to respond to are sort of the sort of generic ones, the neutral comments that are neither really happy or really negative. And why we concentrate on sort of in-stay surveys or any issues, because it's, if a guest is happy, they're happy, and yes, you can always make them happier, but if they leave the hotel happy, that's already great. For in-stay surveys, why they're so valuable is that if there's any things that the guests are not happy about, you can detect that and fix it. And it's also not only for that guest, but quite often the issues that happen, it's probably that they would happen again for future guests. So if you solve that issue once, then the idea as well is that it's not going to happen again, and so you're going to improve the experience of future guests as well.
Absolutely, and it's less about damage control, more about reinforcing this idea that your hotel cares about each individual guest, the personalization aspect of it, and what kind of service you're providing. Exactly. And so, yeah, I'm going to leave this question open to any one of our presenter or panelists. What is the best time to let your guests know about loyalty points? Is it at the time of checking in and out?
So I'll jump in for a second. Do you say to let them know about loyalty points in terms of the ability to earn them, in terms of what they can get them, or you just mean the accessibility?
Didn't specify, but let's talk about the accessibility.
I mean, obviously, from my perspective, it goes all the way back to when they're actually making their booking decision, right? What you want to make clear to the customer is that at the start of their relationship with you, you want to make as clear as possible the ability for you to establish some type of relationship, an ongoing relationship, and make it clear that this isn't, from your perspective, a one-time transaction. And so waiting until they've already booked and they've already stayed, you're already sort of way behind the game at that point, in my opinion. You need to be establishing the relationship from the very get-go. Now, obviously, the checkout and the actual stay are great opportunities to reinforce their feeling of loyalty, and it's important to maintain that connection during those checkpoints. But you certainly shouldn't be looking to wait until all the way at check-in even to wait to acknowledge the guest as a loyalty member.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Mark.
Would I just add something to that, Free? I was just saying, we're linking it back to guest feedback. What we've seen effective as well is that if in the post-stay surveys that you send out after the person's checked out, you can actually ask them about their experience, the loyalty scheme. So you could say, for example, are you aware that there is a loyalty scheme? Are you a loyalty scheme member? Yes or no? Or else you can actually use that, import that data from the PMS system so that you don't have to ask that, but it depends if you can do that or not. And if they're not aware of it, then you can sort of promote it and give them a link so they can find out more about the benefits and join, sign up for your loyalty program. And if they do say that they are a loyalty member, then you can also check, you can ask them, did you get the benefits, maybe the late checkout or whatever it was that you were being offered as a loyalty member. So you can also check whether you're actually carrying through your promises. So you can, in marketing, we promote this fantastic loyalty scheme, but if then it all goes back to guest expectations. But if then whenever you go to the hotel, you're not treated any differently and you don't actually get what you're expecting, it could actually be it could backfire on you and be even worse from a guest experience point of view. So post-stay surveys can be useful to sort of validate how satisfied guests are with your loyalty scheme. And we've seen people using that in the past. It's actually not only checks that, but it also generates new loyalty scheme members for them by asking the question.
Awesome. All right, this next question is for you, Hyatt. How do we increase the level of engagement by staff to mobile technology, especially the traditional employees?
I think this is a really good question and a very interesting question that is prevalent in any kind of software scenario, right? How do you address the different aptitudes of technology and adopting new technology? And I think it comes down to the provider's service approach. How engaged are they with your individual end users? And I think that that's something that, building momentum in the beginning of how this is going to help your employees to go mobile, how it's going to increase connectivity amongst themselves from the back of the house to the front of the house, and showing them the use case, right? Why are we doing this? What's the bottom line? How is this going to impact your performance, the things that you're measured by? And I think that comes down to, again, the service approach of your provider. Is it a very engaging, collaborative approach where you get the feedback from the employees, understanding what slows them down, what they'd like to improve upon, and then come up with a tailored implementation approach to show them how mobile technology can address some of their pain points that they experience every day.
Awesome. All right, so I don't mean to run over, but we might have to slightly, because I think this next question is an important one, and I want each panelist to be able to address it. So what advice do you have for independent properties for leveraging and implementing all of these solutions you guys are discussing when they may not have a brand affiliation or the resource of a large multi-property company? Mark, you want to go first?
Sure. Well, what I would say is, no matter what, you always have the opportunity to establish a relationship with the customer, right? Now, how you do that is going to be determined by your property, and so it may not be as simple as saying, "Oh, I'm going to be part of this brand loyalty program," but you can absolutely establish a personal relationship with these customers through a number of platforms, as the other panelists have actually already established. And so what is critical to this, though, is the customer feels a direct engagement experience with you, and that they tie that to their experience starting at their booking. So starting something that is accessible through your website, that's accessible through your voice channel, these are the key foundations for the start of sort of the customer loyalty experience, and touching base with them there is going to be helpful for you no matter what your affiliation is.
All right, Fiona?
Yeah, I would say for if the independent properties doesn't have all the tools available and everything, for me, sort of what I said earlier, it's actually more about a philosophy, and it all starts with a philosophy and creating a guest-centric culture with your team working at the hotel. It's about caring for guests, and in our case, it's asking for feedback, asking guests what they enjoyed, where they had problems, and trying to follow through on your promises. And I mean, there's lots of things you can do manually by following your reviews on TripAdvisor and responding to your reviews on TripAdvisor. There's lots of things that can be done without technology that maybe you don't have access to. But if it starts by setting clear objectives for your team, telling them what your brand's about, what you believe in, and motivating everybody to go in the same direction, then it can go step by step and use whatever technology you can, but above all, get your team all on the same page.
Right. I think this is a really good question. I think that all technology looks amazing, but it's all about execution, right? And how you map out your plan, right? And I think that a company that's equipped for that, like StayNTouch, where we have a very participative service model that maps out your priorities, right? You can't do everything at once. It's like going to the buffet. You can't pile everything on your plate for the first plate. You're not going to go back up. So I think it's about mapping out your key priorities when it comes to the technology, and then coming out with a phase plan that maximizes adoption of your end users, and then also delivers your the type of guest experience that you want to provide through mobility and through this type of technology. And I think that working with the different technology providers out there, you want a group that is engaged and can consult you and say, okay, this is important out of the gate versus, you know, some of these things are kind of novelties that we can kind of phase into the end user and the guest experience. So I think that that's crucial. You want someone that's truly invested in your success and that's more of a partner, not a vendor.
Awesome. I want to thank all of our panelists today for joining us, giving us your time, and of course all of your great insight. And I especially want to thank our audience for sticking with us the whole way through. Hope you guys come back around for another webinar soon. Please send any additional questions or comments to info@StayInTouch.com, and we will be sure to answer those. The webinar recording and presentation will be available to all attendees and non-attendees within 24 hours. So that said, have a good day. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.